Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am building something that will not stop popping up on my feed. Now, I know that a lot of you out there probably doom scroll in the morning or late at night, and oftentimes the algorithm sees you stop on one particular thing and then that's all you see. And my feed has been inundated with Jimothy. So I thought, why not make them? So that is the premise of why I'm building this, and I'm going to use Needfelting to do so, to make a nice little cool plushie, and hopefully draw some inspiration from it. Let's get to build. Sometimes the very thing you spent your whole life trying to hide becomes the reason people remember you. Today we're making Jimothy, a little raccoon with a spinal deformity who's captured the hearts of millions of people online recently. And while we're building him, I want to talk about something I wish I would have been told as a kid. Different isn't a flaw. Sometimes it's your greatest strength. Before I even started shaping him, I lay everything out onto the table. A single needle for detail, a 3-prong, and an 8-prong needle for bulking out, a felting mat, and a pile of polyfiller for the base. It doesn't look like much, just tools and fluff and a beginning. I ball the polyfiller into a rough little potato shape and start stabbing it over and over again until it begins to condense down. At first it feels like nothing is happening. 1 poke doesn't change much. 10 pokes doesn't. But eventually the soft, shapeless bundle starts becoming something solid. That's how a lot of things in life work. You don't become who you are in one moment. You become yourself through thousands of tiny ones. Now I'm adding the shape of Jimothy's snout to the front of the potato-shaped ball. A few more pokes, a little more pressure, and suddenly the body starts to look like a raccoon instead of a lump of stuffing. That's the part I love about needle felting. You can take something formless and, with enough patience, turn it into something recognizable. Every needle felting project starts the same way. A soft pile of fibers, a few tools, a lot of repetition, and then slowly something begins to emerge. People are shaped the same way, by the conversations we remember, the compliments we hold on to, the moments that made us feel seen, and unfortunately, the insults we never quite forget. I'm starting by rolling the stuffing into a potato shape before adding Jimothy's snout because even the smallest shapes need a starting point. Now I'm adding Jimothy's little legs to the main body. Because of his spinal deformity, he doesn't stand or walk like other raccoons. You notice it right away. And for a long time, I thought being noticeable was the worst thing a person could be. Growing up and still today, I've always hated the way I looked. I've always been a head taller than everyone else, painfully skinny, my teeth crooked from sucking my fingers when I was little, and my family didn't have much money, so the clothes that I wore were usually whatever we could afford. Looking back now, none of those things seem to be very important, but when you're a little kid, those things are everything. Kids can be brutally honest, sometimes without meaning to, sometimes with full intention. They point out every little thing that makes you different, and if enough people repeat the same joke, the same nickname, the same insult, eventually you stop hearing it as someone else's opinion. You start hearing it as fact. You stop thinking they think I'm ugly, and you start believing I am ugly. That's what bullying steals from you, not your confidence, but your identity. Next, I'm blending together different colors of wool with a wool carder to get Jimothy's base coat. I mix the fibers until the colors start to melt into each other, browns, grays, and a little cream. Nothing dramatic, just enough variation to make the fur feel alive. One of the things I love about wool is that the different colors almost never come from one strand. You layer, you blend, you combine shades until something unique starts to appear. People are kind of like that too. Our struggles, our victories, our failures, our scars, our insecurities. Every experience adds another layer until we become someone no one else on earth could ever recreate. For years, I believed the worst thing a person could be was noticeable. I wanted to disappear, to blend in, to give people one less reason to look at me. I thought happiness lived on the other side of becoming normal. Somewhere along the way, I stopped wishing I looked like everyone else, because looking like everyone else isn't what makes someone memorable. Now it's time to add Jimothy's black face markings and white wool around them. This is the part where he finally starts to look unmistakably like Jimothy, other than the no neck. And fortunately, that's what made me think about this little raccoon going viral in the first place. There are millions of raccoons. Why this one? It wasn't because he was perfect. It wasn't because he moved normally. It wasn't because he fit some impossible standard. People love him because he is unmistakably him. The very thing that could have made people ignore him became the reason they stopped scrolling. That's the strange thing about being different. The thing you think will make you invisible is often the exact thing that makes you unforgettable. Next, I'm needle felting down to triangle shapes to make Jimothy's ears, then stabbing them into his head until they stay put. You know what's funny? Almost every insecurity I had growing up eventually became irrelevant. Nobody remembers whether I wore cool shoes. Nobody remembers my hand-me-down shirts. The crooked teeth, they're still crooked. I filled out, I'm a lot less skinny. Life moved on, but what stayed with me was learning to accept the parts of myself I couldn't change. Because confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from finally deciding I'm done apologizing for being myself. time for the finishing details. I add a little plastic push pin for the eyes and nose, and then wires for the whiskers. It's always the small details that breathe life into a project. The eyes, the nose, the whiskers, suddenly the whole thing feels awake. Maybe that's true for us too. Maybe the things you spent years wishing away, your laughs, your freckles, your scars, your height, your crooked smile, the parts of you that feel awkward or inconvenient or impossible to hide. Maybe those aren't flaws at all. Maybe they're your signature. Jimothy doesn't know he's different. He doesn't wake up wishing he looked like every other raccoon. He just keeps being Jimothy. And somehow, that was enough for millions of strangers to smile and be inspired. Last, I'm using acrylic paint pens to add little divisions on his front paws. It's such a tiny detail, but it makes the whole piece feel finished. Funny how that works. The small marks can change everything. I spent years believing different meant less attractive, less valuable, less worthy. Now I think it's completely backwards. Different is memorable, different is authentic, different is human, or in this case, raccoon. The world is already full of people trying to look like someone else. What it's starving for is someone willing to look like themselves. So if you've ever looked in the mirror and wished you were a little shorter, a little taller, a little thinner, a little stronger, a little more everyone else, maybe don't. Because one day the thing you spent years trying to hide may be exactly the thing someone else falls in love with. Maybe the world doesn't need another copy. Maybe what it needs is you, exactly as you are. I always thought I had a face only a mother could love until I found my person. And for some reason, she doesn't mind looking at me, admiring me, not for who I want to be, but who I am. And we are finished. Here is my Jimothy. He's a little plumper. His legs may be a little stumpier than the actual man himself, but I think it turned out pretty cool. I definitely like how the whiskers kind of pop on there and just the no neck kind of, I don't know. I think Jimothy is something that we can all kind of aspire to be more like. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with the ability to see something that never stops popping up on your feed and just build it. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. I think we could all stand to be a little more like Jimothy. Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and you want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together. Dare to be different.